Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and in today's video we're going to take a bit of a perusal, I guess, a bit of a look, an experience, whatever word you want to use, at the British Tier 10 heavy tank, the FV215B, not to be confused with the Tier 10 tank destroyer, the FV215B183. Now, this is a machine you really don't see very much in the game. Sorry, before we get on, I should actually mention, in the first game here, it's being driven for us by Band 1K. And we're here on, I can't remember the name of the map, Fjords. Band is in a 3-man platoon, along with a T110E5, that's the American Tier 10 Heavy, and a T49, the American Tier 8 Light Tank. So, you don't see this tank very much in the game, and, you know, just when you're playing, and one might wonder if there are good reasons for that, and I think there are pretty good reasons for it. I mean, personally, and bear in mind I have not played this machine, I'm currently at the Conqueror in this line at Tier 9. Personally, I have a few issues with this tank. So, while we're just waiting for Band to get into position and waiting for this game to warm up, what is the FV215B? Well, firstly, it's a complete work of fiction. This tank never existed. It never existed even in blueprints, or as a mock-up model, or as a pipe dream. As far as I can work out, this is a completely fictitious wargaming invention. The FV215B did exist, but it mounted a 183mm gun, and that is the tank that we have at Tier 10 on the British tank destroyer line, the FV215B183. Nice shot there from Band. And with that configuration, the tank makes a lot more sense. You know, tank designers, as a general rule, don't put the turret at the rear of a tank, because it makes it really awkward to drive, it's a really awkward configuration, and it's just pretty horrible. Instead, they put the turret in the middle, or toward the front of the tank, like a sensible tank designer. The reason that the FV215B183 was envisaged to have a turret at the back of the tank was because it had a 183mm gun, which was huge and weighed a lot, and so they put the turret further to the rear of the tank to balance out the gun, basically. Now, the FV215B, note the lack of 183, in the game, has a 120mm gun, and so there is absolutely no need to mount this turret at the rear of the tank, especially when you consider that there was already a tank with a similar configuration, you know, with this sort of turret, with the same 120mm gun, and it works perfectly well with a turret in the middle of the tank. It was called the Conqueror. And so this tank is basically historically, completely pointless. Well, it didn't exist, I mean. Anyway, that's the first thing with this tank. So secondly, what's good and bad about this thing? Well, the hull armour is trashy. This is the same hull as the Conqueror, which is basically the same hull as the Carnarvon, and the Carnarvon's hull was not fantastic. So, your hull armour is pretty shoddy. As you just saw there, Band lost half of his considerable health pool to a single artillery shell. Go figure. The side armour and rear armour is even worse. That's HE penetration central. There is some armour on the front of the turret, but it's rear mounted and you only have 7 degrees of gun depression. Now, 7 degrees is not bad, but it's decidedly mediocre. So, yeah, that's kind of awkward. What else is wrong with this tank? It has a large amount of health, but the terrible armour combined with the frontal fuel tanks, those people who may have driven some of the Chinese machines, yes 112, I'm looking at you, will know exactly what I'm talking about here. The frontal fuel tanks mean that this thing catches fire pretty regularly, and when you look at the gun department, it's the same gun that the Conqueror was using at Tier 9. It has been buffed, but it's also a tier higher. So, I don't think you see this tank very much. What I'm getting at in a long-winded way is that I don't think you see this tank very much because it's not particularly good. Basically, it's a very good gun on a very bad chassis. So, yeah. The other reason the British heavy tank line is not actually that good, all told, it's pretty dodgy. And finally, the Tier 9, the Conqueror, is actually quite well liked, and so if you were looking at a British high-tier heavy tank to keep, you'd probably pick the Conqueror. Anyway, while I've spent all that time rambling on, the entire friendly team has been whittled down to just Band's platoon. Just the 3 of them, and they are against... That's right, you are not miscounting 10 enemy tanks, and yes, Band did just bounce off an AMX-30 with APCR that packs 326 average penetration. Now, I'll be honest, he really doesn't need to be firing the APCR here. It won't help him penetrate any, as you just saw with that bounce on the AMX. He is not fighting off against massively well-armoured targets. You saw him using it against the front of the turret of an E100. That makes sense. That is the difference between being able to penetrate the front of the turret and not. Basically, it turns the front of the turret into a weak spot. Ooh, and there's a nice bounce off of his turret. But he really didn't need to be using it in this particular situation. Now, the E50 is tracked, and he doesn't quite have the gun depression, and the reload on this gun is really very good. Unfortunately... his platoon mate in the T-49 has just been taken down. So it's just the 2 of them now. I mean, these guys should have killed this platoon a long time ago, if we're going to be honest. But, you know, back to back they are, trying to make this work. Conqueror, maybe 1, maybe 2 more shots to kill this guy. Oh, 1. That'll do. So what makes this gun good? It has, for a Tier 10 heavy, it has okay... penetration. Ooh, Tier 10 waffle thrower, we do not want that. The alpha damage is, well, let's be honest, it's the joint lowest of any Tier 10 heavy. So the alpha damage is not great, and really, if he's going to keep shooting the waffle, Band here should be loading high explosive ammo, if we're going to be honest. But he's still firing armor piercing. This is a mistake, but never mind. So, ouch. Badoing, off the turret. Yeah, the alpha damage isn't great, the penetration is average, the rate of fire is good, giving it the highest DPM of any Tier 10 heavy tank, but the accuracy and the gun bloom and the gun handling are all sublime. You can see how much the aiming reticule is blooming out as he moves, or rather, not blooming out, if we're going to be honest. It really is astounding. Waffle Thrower takes out Band's observation device there. And somehow these guys aren't dead, and I really don't know how. I will be honest. Band should have loaded a HE round against this Waffle Thrower a long time ago. If he had, this Waffle Thrower would be dead. Now, Band is moving because his platoon mate is dead. He cannot stay there, and it looks like the Waffle Thrower is actually reloading. And so Band should just be able to move up and kill this sucker. The FV, its top speed isn't fantastic. I mean, it's okay, but it's not brilliant. But the acceleration and all that jazz are pretty good for a Tier 10 heavy. One shot into the 110. If the 110 aims this shot well, especially if he loads APCR, he can kill Band here. But no, he doesn't do that. Maybe he was reloading. What can you do? So that leaves a T-34 and a pair of artillery on the enemy team. Band is now on 4 kills and somehow not dead. He's on 159 health. The T-34 can kill him in 1 shot, and either of the artillery can kill him just by sneezing in his general direction. I mean, this is still not a foregone conclusion. There's one of the artillery, he's gone. And that just leaves the T-92 and the T-34. T-92 has a monstrously large gun, but can't hit the broadside of a bomb from the inside. And you can see the enemy team are getting a bit salty in chat there. T-34 has a really rather nice gun, but it's kind of slow and ponderous, and I have no idea why the... Wow. Okay. So, the enemy T-34 kills the enemy T-92 for reasons that I don't fully comprehend, I will be honest. And now I'm just going to speed this up a little bit, because we know the T-34 is nowhere near Band. Assuming that the enemy artillery is down where the artillery usually is, it's going to take Band a little while to get over there. People are saying the T-34 is a bot, but I've never seen a bot program that team kills in this scenario. So, yeah. What you gonna do? Now, Band went down looking for the artillery, didn't find him. There's only 3.5 minutes, right, looking for the T-34. There's only 3.5-ish minutes left on the clock, so Band decides to sit in the capture circle. The enemy T-34 has driven over to the friendly capture circle, and so this game is now a foregone conclusion, because Band is far enough ahead that the enemy T-34 can't cap this, can't even force a draw, so Band will win. Just gonna let this run out. And there we go. Somehow, that game ended up being a win. I have no idea how. So let's go and take a look at the results. Surprisingly, that was only enough for first class mastery. I say only, first class is still nice to get, but I was expecting that to be an ace tanker. But first class mastery, Bruiser, Hand of God, Duelist, Fighter, Fire for Effect, Shellproof, Cool-Headed, Steel Wall, High Caliber, Invader, and a Kolobanov's. Sorry about that, a Kolobanov's medal. For winning whilst being outnumbered by at least 5-1 at the end. And I think a shout out should also go to Band's other two platoon mates, as they were the 3 tanks remaining at the end of that game. 7,789 damage done, 5 kills, 1,237 base experience, and if you look at the damage count of the rest of the team, you can see how hard Band had to carry there. Commiserations to the enemy AMX-30 prototype, who got 3.6k damage. Basically, commiserations to some of the enemy platoon. The enemy LTTB, who managed 1,400 in a tier 7 light tank. The enemy E50, who managed 3k damage, and the enemy Conqueror, who managed 2.3k. You know, they all had respectable games. 27 shots fired, 25 hits, 22 pens, made an astounding number of credits with that damage count, over 100,000, and this is not a premium tank. But once you're taking away repair and ammo resupply costs, he only made a profit because he was running a premium account and got 16,000 credit profit. Blocked almost 4,000 damage with his armor, 100 base capture points. And all told, that ended up being a very nice result. It was far from a perfect game. I mean, he should have switched to high explosive against that waffle thrower right at the end. He fired his APCR unnecessarily, and I'm not having a go at that from a credit perspective, but from the perspective that he could have needed those APCR rounds later on in the game, and instead he wasted them on tier 8s, basically. Where I think he should have been using regular armor piercing. But not to take anything away from that, it was still a very, very nice result to come away with. Here we go with our second game. This is being driven for us today by Mahan, or in this game by Mahan. Again, it's the FV215B. As I mentioned, Mahan's FV is camoed up nicely. However, this is Stalingrad. Speaking personally, I despise Stalingrad. I really, really do. But what you're going to do? Now, it's also worth noting Mahan has 2 marks of excellence on his gun barrel, which is quite nice. And tier 10s, it's quite difficult to get those marks of excellence, so that's a good achievement. Combine that with the camo, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Mahan likes his FV. Which is entirely fair enough, I guess. I don't think it's a great tank, but if you like it, then all power to you. So, Stalingrad. Yeah, this map. It's just one of those maps I despise. This and Abbey, I think, are currently at the top of my, map burning list. I'm not sure which one I hate the more. Ah, well, never mind. Anyway, obviously this is a tier 10 game. Considering the tier 10s available on each team, friendly team have, of course, Mahan in his FV, an IS-7, an Object 263, which is another tank you don't see very often, and a tier 10 Batchat artillery. On the enemy team, you've got a pair of IS-7s, a Jagdpanzer E100, and a Conqueror gun carriage artillery piece. Now, on this map, the enemy team have the better of the artillery draw. Why do I say that? Because French artillery has a very, very shallow shell trajectory, meaning they really struggle to shoot over obstacles. The Conqueror gun carriage has completely the inverse. Ooh, very nice shot. Has completely the inverse problem, if you will. It has a very high shell arc, meaning that it finds it relatively easy to hit people behind buildings, especially when you consider its monstrous splash radius. Anyway, a very nice shot there to kick things off into the enemy IS-7. Gets unlucky as he bounces on this IS-3. Gets a little bit concerned about another IS-3 or an IS-7 coming up to flank him. But manages to bounce the IS-3, and there we go for the shot. Now, I would have actually taken that shot in sniper mode because the IS-3 and this shot can be notoriously bouncy. Ooh, nice high damage roll. And you really want to make sure you aim your shots against those tanks. Yes, even when you have 260 pen. That's the APCR round. 259, so basically 260 pen with armor piercing. Anyway, there's 2 quick kills, and now moving on to the M103. Into the back of the turret. Now, depending on how cheeky Mahon wanted to be, he could actually load high explosive here. The high explosive rounds on the FV, because it's British and they get HESH rounds, they actually have quite a high penetration of 120. And the sides, and in particular the rear of the the M103 are made of paper. But all the same, the M103 has gone up to the big graveyard in the sky. And Mahon is facing off against a tier 9 waffle thrower and a Jagdpanzer E100. Mahon loads his first HESH round. Now, these are not premium HESH rounds, these are regular HESH rounds, and there's a penetration for over 500 damage on that rather unfortunate waffle thrower. Preloads an APCR round for his next round to deal with the hull down Jagdpanzer E100. Jagdpanzer E100 is pretty strong hull down, but as soon as tier 10 tanks double tap that 2 button and load the premium rounds, they get something of the order of 330mm of penetration typically, and that makes a mess of the tank. There you can see those HE rounds. 120 penetration on the HESH round means that he can penetrate that tier 8 medium tank all day long. And that deals a hilarious amount of damage to that poor guy, who appears to be AFK or something. Now, as it turns out, because he didn't quite finish him off, it probably didn't actually make that much difference that he loaded the HE rounds here, as he had to use another shell to kill the guy for the last 44 health anyway. But had that not been the case, he could have really DPM'd that guy into oblivion, and you can see the reload on this gun is very, very good. Now, despite Mahon driving around and murdering everything he finds, being on 3 kills so far, his team is still trailing by 4 kills. I was just about to correct myself and say 3 kills, but no, it is still 4 kills as the friendly IS-7 dies to that Jagdpanzer before Mahon manages to execute him. So, despite Mahon's best efforts, this game is, well, it looks like it's slipping away from them. Someone is in the capture circle, which is kind of awkward. And of the enemy tanks remaining, we should actually bear in mind here, 3 of them are artillery. And of course, Stalingrad is one big city. So they are going to, I'm not saying they're not going to be able to get any shots in, but they're going to struggle with shots. And so while Mahon is actually outnumbered here, while his team is outnumbered by 4 enemy tanks, 3 of those are artillery. So they're actually, in terms of a straight linear engagement, or, you know, a close range engagement, they're actually only outnumbered by 1 tank. And then when you consider that of those tanks, half of the 4 other tanks that the enemy team have are tier 8, it's not actually too bad. Mahon manages to kill that IS-7 with a damaged gun, which was a little bit lucky, but you know, this gun is incredibly accurate. And, oh, now he's dealing with an AMX 5100, manages to bounce one and put one into him, jolly good. Now he kills the IS-7, which of course was, well, one of the biggest threats left on the enemy team. I mean, he was on low health, depending on how much health that Conqueror is on, he is also a significant threat. But Mahon, is now outnumbered here. Not Mahon, Mahon is a type of cheese. He is outnumbered, which is a little bit awkward. Does manage, however, to execute that IS-3 while he waits for his tracks to go back on. Now, he's already used his repair kit on his gun, so he cannot use the repair kit on the tracks. And he does actually take an artillery hit there. I think it might have just been splash damage rather than a direct hit, but either way, it damn well hurt. There's the AMX being cheeky, and a nice high roll guarantees that he will be cheeky no more. wiggling as much as he can to try and bounce this enemy Conqueror. They're using the same gun. Mahan just has a better version of that same gun. Takes another hit from the Conqueror, but manages to execute him for kill number 8, if you've been keeping track. Now, there are 3 tanks left on the enemy team. They're all artillery pieces, and this is where maybe Mahan would have preferred to have not used those HE rounds on the STA-2. Possibly. Having said that, I don't know about the M53, but certainly the Conqueror gun carriage has enough armour that loading HE rounds against it is generally a pretty bad idea. Now, including the APCR, Mahan here has 10 rounds remaining, which should be enough to finish off these artillery pieces. I'm expecting them each to take 2 shells with 400 alpha. So that means it should be 6 shells to kill all of these guys. The problem, of course, being that Mahan has only 204 health. So again, much like the previous replay, the enemy artillery only needs to sneeze in his general direction, and they will be rewarded with a kill. Now, Mahan did actually see the enemy Conqueror gun carriage earlier on. He didn't chase the guy down because at the time his base was being capped and he really needed to get back and do something about that. One thing that's actually been notable in these games has been the lack of fires, and the FV does set on fire quite a lot, so I guess that's why we're seeing games with potentially good results. Let's be honest, if the thing just caught fire, that would rather hinder your chances of performing well. Let's put it that way. Interestingly, Mahan actually uses a premium fire extinguisher here. I mentioned in a previous video, I think about the 112, that I don't rate the premium fire extinguisher. And while Mahan is looking for the enemy artillery, I might tell you why. Basically, the premium fire extinguisher, without going into details, its passive ability, as well as automatically putting out fires, which is grand, but its passive ability is that it reduces your chance to catch fire. However, what it doesn't tell you about the item is that only works for game mechanic reasons. That only works for fires from your engine. It does not work for fires on your fuel tanks. Oh, and the enemy have actually started capping, so it looks like the enemy artillery have not been idle. Now, why is this? Well, every hit to your engine has a chance to set you on fire, so the automatic fire extinguisher can reduce that chance. But that's not how fires from your fuel tanks work. With your fuel tanks, once your fuel tank is quote-unquote destroyed, you automatically set on fire. There's no percentage chance here, it just happens. So the fire extinguisher cannot reduce the chance of that happening, it's just a certitude. A certainty. Now, this is not very obvious from the game client itself. And what this means is that the passive ability from the premium fire extinguisher will do you very little good if your main source of catching fire is from your fuel tanks. If it's your engine, fine, but if it's from your fuel tanks, not so much. Now, it does of course automatically put out those fires, which is true, but is that really worth the extra 7,000 credits? The extra 17,000 credits that you pay for the thing? I mean, you can remap your... Oh! Sorry, M5355 has been spotted, and the gun actually misses. Oh dear. But Mahan cannot wait around, he has to get to the capture circle to do some resetting. Like I was saying, you can just reset the fire extinguisher to be under your space key or something, which is rather easier to access. And he really needs to get a move on here. I'm going to get back to the action. Oh, Conqueror doesn't kill him with that shot. Mahan gets the reset. And this M53 is probably still reloading. He has 1 round of armor piercing left. There's a few APCR rounds after that. Can he finish this guy off? Yes, he can. Now, the Conqueror will be reloading. The thing is, we don't know where that M5355 is. If he was around here, I would have thought he'd have shown himself by now. He hasn't, so there's a good chance he's still back at the enemy base. This Conqueror has a long reload time. Now, I have not been counting exactly how long it has been since we last saw that guy, but he is now dead, so who cares? Now, the problem here is that if the M5355 is back at his base, or somewhere back there, he might have a shot on Mahan, so Mahan gets behind something solid, stays there for a short while, makes sure he's no longer spotted, and continues on his merry way. The enemy Conqueror is saying report their artillery. He's actually AFK. And the enemy team, on the one hand, I don't like it when people reveal an allied position. On the other hand, if the guy is just AFK, then, you know. And when these things happen, it's a little bit of a damp squib. To see someone play a stonking great game, only for them to, right at the end, come across a tank that is AFK. Now, here is the fly in the ointment. We're running down on time. And actually, some of the enemy team were giving Mahan here the false location of the enemy artillery, but there we go. So, we're running down on time here. Mahan is going for the safe option, capping. Eminently sensible. If he went round trying to find and chase the artillery piece, there's a very good chance that he would run out of time here. While he's got the time, he is capping, which is, as I say, very sensible. And I don't blame him at all. And you can see that he's saying in chat his reload time is 7.18 seconds. So, 400 alpha damage every 7 seconds basically with this gun, and he's not using pudding to make that any better. And there you can see he's saying in chat without food consumables. And there we go. That was the game. Another game that was in the end won by base cap. Rather than by killing all of the enemy tanks, something both these games have in common. For my money, this was the better played of the two games. I think Mahan just made a series of good choices. Having said that, I'm not going to take anything away from the first game either, but let's just go and have a look at the results of this one. And here we go. Wow, that's quite an assortment. Ace Tanker, saw that one coming. Hand of God, Bruiser, Demolitionist, I don't remember him ammo racking someone, but whatever, Demolitionist. Who was it? Who got the ammo rack? No. Oh, it doesn't tell me what critical module damage it was. Oh, sad face. Oh, never mind. Demolitionist, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Steel Wall, Defender, Invader, High Caliber, Top Gun, Pool's Medal, Kolobanov's Medal. Holy sweet Jeebus, that was good. 9,104 damage done, 10 kills, 1,577 base experience, and it's worth pointing out, Mahan was kind of running out of ammo toward the end there. He only had 5 shells left. If the last enemy artillery had taken 2, that'd have been 3 shells left. You know, you can see there are limits to how hard you can carry in this tank because of your ammo. But God, that was a good game. Looking at the enemy team, massive commiserations to the enemy Conqueror. 5.3k damage in a tier 9 and a tier 10 game, and not winning is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But there we go, Mahan was on the enemy team. Sorry about that. 30 shots fired, 28 hits, 27 pens. There is that accuracy for you. For that damage count of over 9,000, most of which was from relatively close range. And this tank is usually considered a sniper. And yes, that's right. I did just accidentally make a Dragon Ball Z reference. 11 hits received, 7 penetrations, 4 didn't penetrate, so only 1,680 damage blocked by armor this time round. 13 enemy vehicles damaged, so there were only 2 tanks on the enemy team he didn't damage, and one of those was the artillery right at the end. 10 enemy tanks destroyed, 229 assistance damage, travelled over 5 kilometers, and a tier 10 made a 56,000 credit profit, made 118,000 credits base. Even if you ignore premium account, he still made a 16,000 credit profit. That was a very, very nice result indeed. So there we go. I hope you guys enjoyed that pair of outings in the FV215B, the British tier 10 heavy tank. Once I've finished tripping up over my words. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.